Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Email podcast@providence.edu with questions or comments. Go Friars!
Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum, and I'm here with PC videographer and producer Chris Judge, class of 05. As a major gift officer here at Providence College, I've had the pleasure to meet with hundreds of fascinating people in the FAR community, and I'm happy to bring some of their stories to you. Today, we're meeting with senior Claire Kleinschmidt. Claire is from Duluth, Minnesota. She is an applied physics major with a pre-engineering track, and Claire has done a whole bunch of things here at Providence College and abroad. Claire, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, our pleasure. You have, I was looking at some of your bio, and it's amazing some of the stuff that you've done here on campus and abroad. As I was saying, it's kind of one of those things where you almost, for me personally, I look at some of my life decisions and I question them. I see how productive you are at such a young age. It really is remarkable. And I guess I could start anywhere, but I'll choose to start with what you did this past summer as a Smith Fellow. If you could just explain a little bit about where you went as a Smith Fellow and why you decided to get into the program.
Yeah, so the Smith Fellowship is a program through the school that's really designed to extend the Dominican identity and community of the school. So it's looking to go out into the world. You can literally go wherever you want as long as there's a Dominican community, and you work with either the sisters or the friars or whoever is there to create a 6-week service or learning experience. So I wasn't able to go abroad, and I really wanted to get an international experience, and my faith here has been a huge part of my life. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity. Thought about doing it after my sophomore year, but life got a little too crazy, so I decided to really go after it my junior year. And I talked to a lot of different people trying to figure out where to go, because the entire world doesn't really narrow it down. You have to sort of start hearing some stories and figure out what kind of experiences people had. And talking to Janine Justiniano, who was at the class of 2016, really, I don't know, something was different. I decided to go to the Solomon Islands largely because of the stories that she told me about the love and the people and everything that she experienced there. So I think that's sort of how I got into it. And the Solomon Islands they're off the coast of Australia, so pretty much as far away as you can possibly be. A remote Pacific Islands, and I had never heard of them before, so it's sort of out of left field, but absolutely incredible. So
if you had never heard about them before, so
Nope.
What did she tell you that made you so interested in applying for that specific spot during the Smith Fellowship application process?
She talked about, first of all, you could just tell her eyes lit up, and it was almost every time we would talk about it, it was to the point where she was almost in tears. So I was well, whatever it is, it's life-changing and will impact whatever I do. And I think she just talked a lot about the simplicity. The people there live a very simple lifestyle. It's sort of the island lifestyle you see on the movies with palm trees and huts. But at the same time, she talked a lot about how strong their faith was and how that really shook her and has changed how she sees the world. So just getting to spend time with people you can teach, you can see the clinics, and a lot of it is just living with Bishop Chris Cardone and the sisters there, and just learning more about how Dominicans live.
So you kind of go into it knowing all of those things.
Yeah.
And then you get chosen. Obviously, it must have been a pretty exciting moment. Mm-hmm. And then you're ready to go. So what's it like just getting to, as you put it, basically as far away as you can possibly be from where we currently are?
Yeah, so it's a long application process. You start in pretty much the end of September, and you don't find out until I think it's February or March. So it's a long process. They make you really think about why you want to go. And then once you're selected, it's a lot of planning. And I ended up flying from Minnesota to Houston, Texas. I met with my other Smith Fellow, Lindsay Cholfie, in Houston, and then we flew to New Zealand, and then we flew to Australia, and we got to spend a little time in Australia with Dominican sisters there, and we got to see Queensland a little bit, because I don't know next time I'll be there. So we spent a little time exploring, and then we had an orientation with the Dominican sisters of Sydney, and then from there we flew from Sydney to Brisbane to Honiara, which is the capital of the Solomon Islands. And we spent a couple days getting acclimated there. And then we got on another boat to reach our final island, which was Auki, which is in the Melita province.
So from Duluth to your final destination, how long of a time was that?
It's probably at least 24 hours of just like flying.
Oh my.
So I think I calculated at the end, like round trip, how many miles, and it was like 27,000 miles of travel. So,
yeah. That's nothing. So what was the orientation like? So before you got to the islands, you had that orientation with the sisters, like you mentioned. What was involved with that?
We got to talk to students from a high school there that have done like service and mission trips. And the sisters, most of them in Sydney, have also spent a few years of their lives serving in the Solomon Islands. So they sort of talked to us about like local customs, like don't be surprised if they answer your questions this way, or like this is what the food's going to be like. Remember this when you're traveling, or just like really logistical things. And then we spent some time like just getting to pray and just like spend time together, like talking about their experience. Start getting ready for this like completely different experience. It was so different than anything I'd ever done. So I'm really thankful that we had a couple days to get acclimated.
Right. So what was your first, so when you get on the islands, what was your first impression? What were some of the things that were going through your mind when you finally got there?
So coming in on the boat from the capital to the island we would be staying at, it's picture just like turquoise water, white sand beaches, and you just see like these really cool huts made of banana leaves like lining the shore. It was just like a picture almost. And then you get off the boat and it's really hot and crazy and everyone's trying to get off, and the bishop was sitting there waiting for us, and he put these garlands around our necks and was so excited to see us and whisked us off in this truck to like our final where we'd be staying. And yeah, everyone was just so excited to see us. I think I've never had that kind of welcome before. They take hospitality way more seriously than we do here in the US. So
wow. So how many people were waiting for you as you're pulling in?
I mean, there were crowds there just like waiting for other people. But when the first night we had this welcome dinner with like the entire community was there, all these kids, older people, and they immediately, we were singing and dancing and just like all this stuff that it's like, you would never do this at a casual gathering back home. So
what's it like? What were you thinking when all of this was happening? Because obviously it seems to be, right, you're spend a lot of time in preparation. As you mentioned, you basically spent, 10 months
getting ready.
Either, applying and getting ready. And then you get there, and it really is like this celebration for you guys just to get there. It's kind of like a role reversal of what you're thinking. Like, we're going there, on a mission trip. We're going to be of assistance, and you're getting there, and it obviously must have been a pretty wild experience overall.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting them to like be so excited to see us. We were so excited to meet them, and I think we were really blessed getting to be there for 6 weeks and getting to like spend time with the families and spend time with all the people that are like in those communities. And I think we knew going in that we ultimately would be like learning more than anything we could ever bring or teach. That it was more about just like learning, and I don't know, there was just an intense sense of joy, everything we did. Like we could be doing almost nothing, like things that I would consider trivial here, playing cards, going for walks, but it was just like the joy that they did everything with made all the difference. So
what was your specific role while you were there? Like, what was some of the reasons that you went down there?
I was really interested initially in teaching science. I heard that they really didn't have many science teachers there, and that was sort of what initially drew me in. Janine told me about like a need for just people who are excited about teaching. The teachers there don't necessarily they're not necessarily as well trained, or like it's more of a problem having teachers show up than having students show up. So they just want people who are really excited about teaching and helping to improve the education. So that is initially why I was going. But we sort of learned that a lot of our time there was just going to be spent being with the people. Like it was going to be living the life, going to the market, waking up at 6 a.m. to go to mass and to daily prayer with the sisters. It was going to be like helping take care of the kids. And the bishop actually that we were there with became the archbishop while we were like, he was transitioning out. So a lot of it was his goodbye parties and like being with him and seeing like the Catholic community there. So the first part of the trip, I would say, was a lot of just like getting to know the people and like living there. Like we felt like we were part of the community. And then the last part was a lot of, we worked in the kindergartens, we helped at the high school. I really wanted to bring some of the stuff that I do here on campus. We work with an education portal in the research lab I'm in, and I wanted to bring that and just work with students and help them get excited about learning, hopefully.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Bishop Cardone, let's say Archbishop Cardone now, he's a well-known figure, kind of not just in the PC community, but elsewhere. As part of my job, I'm down in Long Island a lot, especially in Nassau County. And if I've heard it once, I've heard it, a dozen times. Do you know Bishop Cardone? Do you know Bishop Cardone? He's so well-known in that area. What was it like working with him?
I knew that he was like an incredible man, but being there and like seeing what he does every day was so much more than I thought it would be. He takes the kids in, he educates them. If kids are hungry, they come to him. He's always working with the community. He's there with the people at everything they do. He's cleaning everything up and just like so kind and humble about everything that he does. It's just like when you're with him, he gives you all the attention that in the entire world, but he's taking care of pretty much the entire community.
Wow.
So yeah, it was just this very like humble service. Like he's very laid back, but you know that he would do anything.
And as part of the Smith Fellowship, I know every Smith Fellow has to do a running blog of their experience while they're abroad. And yours, clairekleinschmidt.wordpress.com.
Yep.
We'll have a link in the show notes if anyone wants to read it. It's really well done. You do a great job of detailing a lot of the different things that you did. You're obviously a very strong writer. With that said, in one of your posts, you mentioned that he likes to talk about, or did speak about, how his church is alive there. For you, what did that mean, and what was he getting across when he was talking about that?
We had one conversation, I think after dinner one night, where he said, like if you're comparing the church in the U.S. to the church in the Solomon Islands, if in the Solomon Islands all the churches burned down, there were no physical buildings, the church here would be alive and well. Like the people, I think largely because of his example, are just so faithful. They're so, the kids run to Mass 40 minutes every morning. It's 5:30 in the morning to be at Mass. Kids, teenage boys, like all these different things. Like that's something that I've never seen in my experience, like being Catholic. So, yeah, his work there, building the church and having the people like really like grasp their faith. There's so many young boys that we met. They're like, I'm going to be a priest. Like so many, just because of his example. So,
and how did that? I shouldn't say how. In what ways, if at all, did it shape how you view your faith, or how did it have an impact on you personally? I don't want to get too personal. I don't want to ask inappropriate questions, but obviously must have had some sort of impact, just the way you're describing him.
I mean, I'm involved in campus ministry here on campus, and I think it's affected how I see my role as like a leader and like a fellow human being. More of like coming at things from like a service perspective of just like if I am like he's a priest, but he sees it as very much like I'm here to serve you, almost like he could be likened to like the Pope Francis-esque like service motto. So I think I've just seen like how much there is to do just being with people and doing little things and just treating everyone with like respect and love, and how that can bring us closer to God. So I think that's what I learned a lot about being there.
That makes sense. So for you, I guess kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, and I bring it up because what you just mentioned about the boys running to Mass for 40 minutes to get there at 5:30 in the morning. Just what are the islands like physically? If you kind of paint the picture of what it's like to be on the islands or to live there for an extended period of time.
So I think initially I knew that there were multiple islands, and I pictured them close together to the extent that like you could look across the ocean and see the next one, but they're pretty far apart. So they feel like you're just on one island, but there are numerous islands, and a lot of them are made out of coral actually. So it's just this beautiful, like it's near the Great Barrier Reef, so you can just see like on the beaches, there's just this incredible coral everywhere. And it's something that we would be amazed by, but they just think it's like casual pebbles. And there aren't many roads there are just a few dirt paths through like palm trees and simple houses everywhere. They're all really clumped together. The community is huge there, so people love living together and being together and working together. But physically, the islands, like, they're something that we would go to for like a tropical paradise. Mm-hmm. And they're so beautiful. The people, though, I think are what make them like the most beautiful. They're always around playing together. They're so much more laid back. Like, just picture like having no schedule. The only thing on our to-do list every day was we had to pray twice a day. Everything else was just sort of like, it'll happen when it happens on Solomon time, and very relaxed, and people are just focused on like the important like things in life, just being together and forming a strong community. So
right. And say most people have lived there their entire lives, or you have people kind of who emigrate in, or how does the population made up?
It's pretty much just people that have lived there their whole lives. Some of them have never even been to the other islands, even though there's like quite a few ships. So think like they have small canoes that they fish in. They do a lot of like farming. So they're pretty like, they live very like subsistence lives. They're like living on the same islands, and that's why like it's broken into different tribes. So we learned like a few different words from each tribal language, but they identify very strongly with the tribe that they're a part of, and like the music and traditions and the art and all of that's really woven into everything they do. So if you go to mass, it's a 3-hour mass, and there's dancing and there's art, and it's like they act out the gospels, and the kids are involved, and there's tribal greetings everywhere you go. If we went to a new island, you pull up in your canoe and these tribal warriors like run out to greet you, which was terrifying the first time it happened. Jumping out of trees, and like they look like they're about to come beat you up, but it's just sort of like a tradition. They've really held on to a lot of their culture and their traditions while still like introducing, like Christianity was introduced a while back. That's not native to that area, so they've really integrated their culture into like their new faith. So
interesting. So mass almost sounds like a festival.
Yeah, it was a huge party. Mass. And it's not like a 1-hour thing you do. It's like the entire day. You go, it's multiple hours long, and then afterwards they all just hang out and eat food together and just spend time with one another.
Wow. So when you came home, all right, so assuming that no one read your blog, which I'm sure everyone did, but say you made that assumption and you started, telling somebody a story about your time in the Solomon Islands, what would be the first story you would tell them?
I tell a lot of people about Sister Loretta and Sister Sani. Those were the two sisters we lived with. And I don't know if I have like one specific story, but just like every morning waking up with them and just this enthusiastic greeting and making us tea and coffee, and like we'd have this dog 090 that would follow us around everywhere, and then the kids would come, and every day we would just go fish or tag, or they would try to make us American foods, which was sometimes not always very successful. Like pizza with spaghetti on it. And they were like, yeah, this is pizza. And we're like, we don't put pasta on our pizza. Just like how they try to make us feel welcome, and just like the day-to-day things. Everything was just, like, I've never laughed so much in my entire life.
I want to learn more about this dog. Tell me about 090.
090 has been hit by a car twice and is blind in one eye, and he doesn't walk that great. He's named after a chainsaw brand, 090, because he snores like a chainsaw. But he would just like follow us around everywhere he went. And the bishop's last mass at the cathedral there, when we were there, he came to mass for the first time and tried to like walk down the aisle with the bishop. But then he disappeared for a while, and we thought it was because he was really missing the bishop. But we finally found him, and he came back, and he's like a celebrity. Everyone knows this dog. He's so like loyal that he just comes everywhere with you.
So why did he attach himself to you two?
I don't know. He felt like our protector while we were there. Like, we really didn't know anything, and he would sleep outside of our door every single night. And I think we gave him attention and food, which helped. But yeah, 090. I miss that dog.
So while you were there, you also did a little work that kind of ties into some of your academic experience here at PC, and your applied physics and pre-engineering track experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So on campus, I'm in Dr. Steve Mecca's S-Lab, which works in sanitation, education, and health within the developing world. So a big part of the lab was developing this educational portal a couple years ago. And basically, it's just a flash drive that has tons and tons of educational resources, like Khan Academy, there's Wikipedia, there's all these like health guides, there's stuff to get kids to help learn them, like teach them how to read, tons of books, math resources, textbooks. So in places that don't have internet access, or they don't have textbooks, or they don't have many teaching resources at all, you can bring this little flash drive and simple tablets that are really inexpensive, or laptops that we actually got donated from. They were donated by a school in Australia. We brought that combination and were able to set up this lab in the Solomon Islands while we were there that allowed them to access basically what we would consider the internet and have access to all these new resources. So we did lessons with them. We taught the teachers how to use it. We had like English classes that would use it as they were trying to teach different parts of speech. So that was sort of a project while we were in the Solomon Islands, is instituting this, what we call the educational like lab in a box from the S Lab.
So is this something that you do over your coursework? Or is this something more an extracurricular activity that gets kind of tied into your research? Or how does that come about in your studies here on campus?
I chose freshman year. I was really interested in work that I'd heard about from other students that were older than me. So I just chose to take a couple credits of research and join the lab. And I've been doing it for the last couple years. And I actually didn't develop really anything that has to do with the educational portal. I just have like seen it implemented in many schools. And especially it really started in Ghana. And I got to see it in Ghana. I got to go with Dr. Mecca and work in the schools there. So I saw how much of an impact it can have. It can bring schools that are at the bottom of the list performing really poorly to one of the best schools in the region just through this. Because kids need books. They need things that can push them and teach them and get them excited about learning. So I got really passionate about it there. But I've worked in other parts of the S Lab, more of the sanitation aspects my last couple of years.
Got it. And that's obviously a very interesting project as well. Mm-hmm. With, you know, I don't know the proper name for it. Like the portable toilet.
Yeah, it's called the microflush toilet.
Got it.
Yeah. So Dr. Mecca and I guess different teams of students have worked over the years to develop this microflush toilet, which is a very like sustainable solution to sanitation in rural communities. So areas where you can't have plumbing, you can't have septic systems, you can build this toilet and it actually creates local businesses. It's not something that we build for people. It's something that we empower them to do themselves and create small businesses. So it ends up being about $200 US. It can be made with local materials. It operates on 1 cup of water that is used from the hand washing, and it composts everything. And it's nearly a closed system. So it's really an incredible thing that can also transform communities, and it improves health just by like taking care of waste. So it's been so moving and transforming to like be part of that sort of engineering while I've been here. So
when you were in Ghana, were you focused more on the portal piece or kind of the sanitation piece? Or was it a little bit of both? Yeah, we were actually able to do both. I got to help teach a team how to build the toilet and see how they were made. So that like after working on it for years here, getting to see it in the field was really cool. But then we also spent about half the trip visiting schools and seeing how the educational portal was doing, and working just like to make it a better resource for the schools, just checking in on how it was doing. So it was a mix of both. When we were talking before we started recording, you mentioned how you, as a freshman, you did 3D printing? Yeah, so I've gotten to do 3D drawings and models of the toilet and different aspects of the lab. And actually I stayed here after my sophomore year and just did 3D printing 8 hours a day. So I taught myself sort of how to do it and how to build it. And we've printed models of the toilet that are really helpful in teaching people who don't necessarily speak English. So this toilet is in, I don't want to get the number wrong, but at least 20 countries around the world. Wow. So some of them are English speaking, like Ghana, they speak English there, but a lot of like Latin American communities that we're putting in, and now
we have everything translated into Spanish, but sometimes the tribal dialects and different things aren't quite right. So having a physical model of the toilet to demonstrate how to assemble it and what pieces go in sort of became a need. So that was one of my projects during the summer, was creating this physical representation of the toilet through 3D printing. So that was really, really cool.
So it sounds amazing, but at the same time, why is it important to have this in some of these remote areas?
So millions of people die every year just from like diarrheal related diseases. And a lot of that is just contaminated water. So people are trying to fix the water crisis around the world. And that's great. Like, we need more wells and stuff, but you can also go like a step deeper and say, like, why is the water dirty? It's because we're not separating waste. Like, people are just defecating in the bush and like on the side of the road. Like, there's no designated area. So if we can control the waste and like process it separately, that will also help the water situation. So it's huge, just like from a health and water standpoint. So
you're really going to the root cause on both of these projects, from the education standpoint and from a sanitation standpoint. So both of these sound amazing, and I'm astounded at what you guys have been able to accomplish. Did you have any idea you were going to do this when you chose to come to PC? I mean, obviously, you don't have to spend a lot of time on PC's campus to know that we don't have many students from Minnesota. So what kind of drew you in from Duluth? What was part of the decision-making process for you? And how did you think your educational experience was going to progress when you were making that decision?
Yeah, so I went to a Dominican grade school, so I knew Veritas and I had the torch growing up. And when I was looking at colleges, I found PC in a magazine when I was just flipping through and said, oh, that's interesting. I know all that stuff, so maybe I'll apply. And I ended up visiting and really, really liking it. So that's sort of how I ended up here from Minnesota. And I came in undeclared, so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was interested in engineering, so I did the engineering classes because I knew that if I didn't start, I would get off track. So I was like an undercover engineer the first semester, and I never really stopped. So I finally declared the major. I really liked just the problem-solving approach, but I had absolutely no idea any of the stuff was going on campus, that there were like different trips that you could do or like what research opportunities there were. I just really liked math and science and problem solving, so it sort of all expanded from there. And
a lot of people who do the pre-engineering track, they'll stay for 3 years before they move on, but you obviously decided to stay for a fourth. So what was part of that decision-making process for you?
Yeah, I really struggled with figuring out if I should leave last year. So most of the people who are doing this 3-2 pre-engineering track do leave. And I applied, and I was ready to go, but something didn't quite feel right. I knew that there was still more work that I could do here and more things that I could learn. And it's hard after like 3 years of making friends and joining clubs and doing all this stuff to be like, okay, I'm going to skip out on my senior year when everything's finally sort of about my class. So I decided to stay, and I'm really glad that I did. This has definitely been the best year so far, just getting to spend time with everyone. And I stayed largely because I knew like within campus ministry, like my role wasn't over yet. Like I wanted to do more with that, especially after the Solomon Islands coming back. I was like, I feel like it would just be an abrupt end. Like I have more to share and more to do here. And my research projects in the lab weren't finished. And yeah, I didn't really want to leave friends in Friartown yet. So I decided to stick around.
Well, we're glad you did. And what's your specific role within mission and ministry now?
This year, I'm the president of campus ministry leadership. So I've worked a lot with the peer ministry program, and I did FaithWorks. So I sort of slowly worked my way into campus ministry. I wasn't involved in it right away. But yeah, developing the peer ministry program and working with those people and just like learning, like, this is a priority of mine. Like, this is really important to me in my life. And this year, like, getting to work with like the leadership team and how everything's put together has been really great. So I'm definitely glad I stayed.
And about a month and a half ago, we had Father Pravarnik on the podcast, and he was talking a little bit about how campus ministry has changed, especially from a peer ministry standpoint, a lot in the past 2 years. Obviously, you're a part of that. So for you, what's been the biggest change in terms of just its impact on campus that you've seen?
Yeah, so I was one of the first 4 initial peer ministers. They did a pilot program 2 years ago, and we had a small group, and we met every other week, and I didn't really even know that my co-partner who I was leading the group with, and the relationships that we formed and the community that was like brought about through this peer ministry program like really changed my college experience. I ended up actually like rooming and being best friends with my co-leader and a lot of the kids. I guess they're not kids. A lot of my peers in my small group have become really close friends. It allows you to just take an hour and a half every other week to talk about like the deeper questions and to like really check in and see how you're doing from like not just like a casual standpoint, but from like a very like deep, like what do you want to do with your life? Like what's important to you? And I think that creates like really deep relationships that you might not find anywhere else on campus unless you're very intentional about it. So it was pretty successful the first year. And then last year it expanded to having from 4 leaders and 2 small groups to having about 20 leaders and about 10 small groups. So it really expanded. And then this year it's even growing bigger. So a big part of these last couple of years has been joining what was campus ministry and the service groups and the faith formation and everything that's now what we consider council, joining that with peer ministry. So we've united that under campus ministry leadership. So there are 2 programs. And I think seeing like peer ministry on campus, we have, I think the latest number was 170-ish participants this year in this program. So a good chunk of campus is a part of these small groups and is benefiting from like more authentic community. So I think it's like really helping the PC community at large, hopefully.
And when you get into a situation where you're speaking with your peers about topics that involve a lot of introspection, is there some sort of kind of warming up process that comes along with that? I would assume that unless you're like really close to somebody, you might not be inclined to open up as much as you may, as much as the question might, want you to. So what was your, how has that worked out for you and some of your peers?
So we really start with like building a community. The first couple meetings aren't like, what is the meaning of life? It's not that deep right away. It's a lot of just like, let's talk about your life up to this point. Like, let's get to know each other. A lot of it is just like activities. There's like a come and see social where it's just like hanging out on the quad and like eating food together. And the small group leaders are really responsible for, on the off weeks, like bringing your group out to dinner or like doing things that like build this community. And I think like we talk about like what are ways we can get more of this campus involved in campus ministry and like invested in their faith. And it's not through, at least I believe it's not through necessarily like preaching, but it's going to be through like having authentic relationships and like really getting to know people and like setting an example just through like how you live. So it's this like relational ministry that is sort of becoming a part of campus ministry.
And I can see why your time with Archbishop Cardone would have such an influence on you in this group, because as you just mentioned, it's about kind of like being a shining example. Maybe not shining example, I don't want to like put too much praise, but being somebody who lives their faith as opposed to preach their faith in a way, kind of drawing bees with honey, I guess. Yeah,
if you can just like live a life that is joyful and happy, like people will be curious and wonder why. So that's sort of what I encourage. Just try to be a good person, be happy, and see where it goes from there.
So you're involved in so many things, right? So you're seriously invested in several different things. So when you look past your time at PC, what are some of the things you're excited to do, say, after graduation, or kind of long-term or short-term goals that you may have?
I'm not entirely sure what I want to do with my life yet, but I really have loved like the developmental engineering that I've gotten to do here. And I think if I continue being an engineer, I want to do that sort of engineering projects that are like really working at fixing really basic essential needs like worldwide. I want to work on stuff like that. And I've also learned that I can't just like have my faith be like the separate part of my life. So figuring out ways to do that. And I want to travel more. I want to go explore more. Hopefully, I would love to do more work with the stuff that we're doing in the lab, like bringing that to different places. So that's sort of a little bit of what I'm hoping for. A lot of it, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but...
All right. Well, this is great. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. This has been absolutely fantastic. Again, people can read more about your time at Solomon Islands at clairekleinschmidt.wordpress.com.
Yep.
And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.